Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. So good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Ridge's Fall 2025 Wholesale Virtual Tasting. I'm Michael Torino. I'm the Senior VP of Global Sales here at Ridge, and I'll be the host for today's tasting. We appreciate you joining us wherever you're tuning in from. We have people from all over the country joining us today. It's pretty exciting. This is always one of my favorite touch points of the year, an opportunity to connect with all of you, our wholesale partners, and not just taste through the new releases, but also talk to the people and hear the stories behind the wines. It's always such a good time for us, and hopefully for you as well. I'm also particularly excited today. We get to introduce a new wine to you, to the wholesale channel, which is always a lot of fun, one that I think you're really going to like, and it's going to sell really well for you. Before we dive into the tasting, I do just want to make a couple of announcements, some exciting announcements about the Ridge sales team and our distribution network. So first off, I'm thrilled to announce that Christina Donnelly has been promoted to National Sales Director. Many of you know Christina. She's been with Ridge for over 2 decades. Her leadership and commitment and dedication to Ridge are unwavering, and it's a real well-deserved step forward for her. I'm excited to see what she does in this role. We also have 2 new people that we'll welcome in. Brian Scott, he's our new Western Regional Sales Manager based out of Sacramento, California. He'll be running the West for us. And Maggie Morehouse, who's based in Denver, Colorado, has joined as our Central Regional Sales Manager. And then, of course, Tom Biaso is our steady Eddie on the East Coast over there. I'm really excited about this mix of experience, leadership, and energy. You know, we're very fortunate to have this team for us, and I'm excited to see what they do here going forward. I also want to extend a very warm welcome to our new California wholesaler. So Aspect Fine Wine, which is the fine wine division of Breakthrough, started representing Ridge on September 2nd. We're really thrilled to have you represent us in our important home state, and really excited to see what impact that has in the market statewide for us. While we're on the topic of sales teams, I always like to give a shout out to the team, and they're out in full force again today. Christina's in El Paso, Texas with the Southern Glazers Wine and Spirit team. Tom is in New York City with Frederick Wildman, our good friends at Frederick Wildman. They've been representing Ridge Wines for over 55 years. That's the kind of partnership you really don't see in the wine industry anymore with all the consolidation. Excited to have them on board with us today. Maggie's in St. Louis, Missouri with the Southern Glazers Wine and Spirits team. And lastly, Brian Scott is actually in Richmond, California with the Breakthrough and Aspect team. So welcome in, guys. Thanks for organizing all the folks to join us today, and for being out there with them supporting. I'll introduce our panelists at this point. So we'll start with John Olney, our head winemaker and COO at Monte Bello, at Ridge, excuse me. He's sitting at Monte Bello today, waiting on grapes. We'll get into that in a little bit. Shauna Rosenblum, our head winemaker at Lytton Springs, and Dave Gates, our senior vice president of Vineyard Operations. So welcome in, guys. Thanks for joining us and taking time out of harvest to spend a few minutes with us here. We have a full slate of wines today, 6 wines to taste. We'll start with our 2024 Grenache Blanc, and then we'll go to the 2023 Pagani Ranch Zin, followed by 2023 Lytton Springs, 2022 Lytton Estate Petite Sirah. We'll do our new wine after that, the 2023 Santa Cruz Mountains Cabernet Sauvignon, and finish with 2022 Monte Bello. We'll spend a few minutes on each wine. We are on Zoom, so we encourage you guys to jump into the chat and give feedback, share your thoughts on the wines. If you do have questions for the panelists, please do that in the Q&A so we can see it. The chat goes really, really fast, and we can't always keep up, but we'll answer as many Q&As as we can live today with the team while we have them. So with that, we'll transition into the first wine, into our Grenache Blanc. And Dave, as we kind of call on you to talk us through that wine, can you give us a little update first on what harvest is looking like?
Sure. Welcome, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. We're actually not picking grapes at Monte Bello, which is kind of a tale of 2 harvests here. As I'm sure everyone knows, it's been a cool year on the West Coast, and we ended up kind of getting into the swing of things kind of on a normal schedule. You know, what's normal these days, right? Basically, that means in Sonoma County, we were picking on Labor Day. And Shauna's got most of the, all of East Bench in, most of Lytton Springs, probably 70% of Lytton Springs. John has 60% of Geyserville in tank right now. And so that's going along swimmingly. Monte Bello has slowed way down, which is typical for us. It's usually a kind of a delta between when we are picking our Zinfandels in the North Coast and when we actually get into Monte Bello, and that's definitely going to be true this year. We've gotten a little bit of Merlot in, and the first of our first harvest from our phase 2 section. So more Cabernet coming your way, Mike, in a couple years, which is a good thing. And
That's
I'm
music
going,
to my ears, Dave.
yeah, good. Yeah, patience, which is what we've been saying that for 10 years now. Anyway, and down in Paso, the Ducey Zin, Benny Ducey Zin came in on schedule right after Labor Day. Beautiful fruit, and then we've done one little section of Grenache Blanc from Adelaida, and we're waiting on everything else now. We've had a little cool spell for the last week and a half, and once these little systems go through, it's supposed to warm up again, and that's what we kind of rely on. So we're segueing into a kind of the second half of the vintage. But you know, we've been talking a lot internally, and John and Shauna, you can back it up, but you go out and walk in the vineyard and you say, oh my God, this tastes so good, let's pick it. And then you take a sample, get it into the lab, and it's 21 bricks or 22 bricks or 20 bricks or something. So not quite ripe enough to make a full-bodied wine. And so that always leads to really good vintages. When the grapes are tasting really great in the field, when they're not ripe yet, that's always a good sign. So very happy, but you know, that's kind of farming, right? I'm always an optimist with a big dose of reality. But yeah, it's going to be a good year. We just have to get it picked and get it in the winery. Let's see, we're looking at the 24 Grenache Blanc. So this was a year that was fairly early for us, and the grapes came in like clockwork beautifully. This has some fruit from the Adelaida district and also from Fossil Creek, which is a Ducey planting. Mike Ducey and his family's planting from the Willow Creek district. You know, Paso, as everyone knows, thanks to the Haas family and the Perrins, is kind of the epicenter of the Rhone movement here in California. And this Grenache Blanc clone and the Picpoul and the little bit of Roussanne all came from them, importing them in 30 years ago almost now. And it's big hats off to them. And we think that California is a great place for Grenache Blanc, especially grown on limestone soil down in the Central Coast. It's just absolutely marvelous. It's easy to grow in terms of fruitfulness and getting ripe, because it is Grenache, it's precocious, it gets sugar really quickly. It also has this, you know, the flavors on the nose can range from citrus to melon, but it always has this great bracing minerality and great acidity, and that's kind of what carries this wine. You know, you guys can chime in, but what I love about this wine is that it's not necessarily a serious wine, but it's a very versatile wine. It's got this freshness and great acidity, but there's also this drippiness on the finish that really invites food, and it makes it quite versatile.
Yeah, definitely. And you know, this marks the first vintage that Fossil Creek is the largest component of that wine. And John, I know you really love the Fossil Creek fruit and what that brings to this wine and to the blend here. Any thoughts on kind of how that blend's coming together of the vineyard mix?
Yeah, so you know, Mike Dizzy planted this fairly young vineyard, and he started planting with Grenache Blanc and some Picpoul. And you know, what's nice is that, you know, when you have the ripeness, you know, we get most of the ripeness from the Grenache Blanc, and to have the Picpoul really come in and maintain the acidity, I think, is part of the magic of the blend. And Mike's also planted a little bit of some lesser known Southern Rhone varietals, Bourboulon and Claret. So those are starting to come in small amounts. So we'll see what those do to the blend.
Excellent. And when you say small amounts, is it enough to make the front label? Is it going to be over that 1%, or is it?
Yeah, no, I think it will. It's but we've got to do the we've got to see what how it works with the wine first. But
Sure.
Certainly there's enough of it.
Excellent, excellent. That's cool. Very cool. And Shauna, any thoughts on the Grenache Blanc?
Yes. Hey guys. Muted because there's many active forklifts in my background, so just trying to keep it quiet. Yeah, the Grenache Blanc is gorgeous. I love the 2024. I think as someone who really enjoys Chardonnay, this Grenache Blanc kind of checks that box for me, but also in a way that's not, just Chardonnay. It's really complex. And yeah, I love the addition of the pick pool, the minerality. And for me, I think Fossil Creek is actually one of my favorite vineyards in the mix. So I'm happy to see that we have predominantly Fossil Creek this year. Super yummy.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the chat, you have a Team Chardonnay fan out there with you, which is always fun. And the folks that are listening in, I mean, this wine has obviously been incredibly successful for us since we launched it, and just excited. I mean, we bring it out, and Soms love it, buyers love it. Great food wine. It fits in a lot of places. There's a lot of by the glass accounts out there. So yeah, excited to see where this continues to evolve and go. And we have one question that I just saw pop in. Dave, does Fossil Creek supply any of the reds, any fruit for reds? It does not, right?
No, they have some Zinfandel planted there, but Mike and family sell it, and I know Janelle Ducey makes a little bit of the whites, but the rest of the vineyard is Zin.
Okay, got it. Perfect. Great, awesome, thank you, Shauna.
John, I love the barrel program in this vintage. It's really pretty.
Yeah, no, it's pretty.
Yeah, what's the difference there, John?
Well, so really for 24, we did it's kind of a mix in terms of the majority is barrel fermented, though most of that has been fermented in neutral oak. We do use less than 5% of some new oak, which is primarily American. And then a certain amount of this also fermented in stainless, just to kind of maintain that freshness and that brightness in the wine.
Nice. Excellent. So we'll transition over to our first red wine. And Shauna, if I can maybe call on you to talk a little bit about the 23 Pagani Ranch.
Yeah, definitely. Get some in my glass. So 2023 was a challenging but interesting vintage. One of the coldest on record in recent history. We had about 64 inches of rainfall, which is more than twice annual average. 2023 was the year where it snowed here on the geysers at Lytton Springs. Actually, I'm going to share a painting I did of it with you guys because I happen to have it here. This was, let's see, can we see it? No, virtual background be darned. Okay, anyway, it's a neat painting. Anyway, so it snowed on the geysers. It was really cold, and that pushed the whole growing season back by about a month. And we harvested equally late. So we didn't even start picking grapes until September 11th in 2023, which, to give you an idea, we finished harvest on September 16th in 2024. So, or I'm sorry, 2022. So like a full month late, and then it lasted into November. And very cold, but kind of similar to what Dave was saying about this year, where we would go out in the vineyard, and because the grapes had an opportunity to spend so long on the vine, there was so much flavor, beautiful acidity. We were seeing soft skins, brown, crunchy seeds. The flavors were just explosive. And then we'd run a lab analysis, and it's 19.5 or 20 bricks. So kind of just like Dave was saying, what we're seeing this year too, when we have really concentrated, beautiful flavors in the fruit before it's even fully ripe. Like that's pretty exciting. And 2023 was challenging in that way, but after the wine spent a year and 14 months in barrel, concentrated a little bit. Morgan Twain Peterson internally, we were tasting, he called it a unicorn vintage. And I kind of have to agree with him. 2023 is really excellent across the board, all different varieties. So Pagani Ranch is beautiful site down in Sonoma Valley. And one of the coolest sites that we have, so sits under fog most mornings until about noon. And so the last Zinfandel that we harvest comes from Pagani as well. And there's lots of old vines there, so planted in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And then there's some younger plantings as well. And we make two different wines from Pagani Ranch. We make the Pagani that we're all trying right now. And then we also make the Normas, which hopefully some of you have had a chance to try that. And that includes some of the Teinturier varieties. So there's actually this really cool block. It's a mixed block. It's block 35 in Pagani. And it's planted to Alicante Bouschet, Grand Noir, and Len Noir. So I know you've all heard of Alicante Bouschet. You guys are professionals. You probably know all three of these actually. But it's super duper rare to find all three of these interplanted. And so we pick that block and co-ferment the Alicante Bouschet, Len Noir, and Grand Noir, and turns it into this like dark wine concentrate that's just savory and really interesting, kind of plummy. And then we utilize some of that in this wine and then some of it in our Normas as well. So varietal breakdown this year in Pagani, 79% Zin, 10% Alicante, 9 Petite, 2 Mataro. Nice little 14.4% alcohol. And we did about 15 to 18%, I want to say, new oak on this. In a vintage where things are a little bit lighter and brighter acidity, we'll usually start off with kind of a judicious new oak add, maybe 15%, because you can't take it out. You can add more. But and so when a wine is really delicate in that way, we don't want to overpower it with the oak. So we're really cognizant of just being light in the beginning. And then when the wine comes up for racking in spring, we'll assess and see if we want to add more new oak. What do you guys think?
I love it.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Ooh, dive in right now to it, but you kind of touched on it a little bit when you talked about Norma too. I mean, this is a partner vineyard for us, but we've been making this since 1991, and the incredible history behind this vineyard. And Dave, I know you could speak a little bit to this. I mean, it's formed by a fourth generation family member at this point, and it's the fact that it kind of went through Prohibition, all the old patch is the old patch. It's really pretty incredible.
Yeah, Dino Amentiti had been pestering his great uncle for years. This is back in the 90s to plant some of the old orchard and fallow sites that had been they used to run cattle, so they had some pasture land and some old orchard land. And finally, in the 2010, 2011. He was able to kind of gather up his family, and they were able to do some more planting to kind of keep the ranch functioning. And it's a good relationship that we have with them, a really good partnership. And I'm really kind of very appreciative of the fact that the extended Pagani family, and they're living all over the place now, but they are fully committed to keeping vines in the ground here instead of houses, right? So it's been great. I always call the Pagani I joked with it with Shauna the other day. It's Zinfandel on the wild side, right? It's got this raciness to it and great acidity always. And I think the Alicante adds to that raciness. So yeah. Anyway, it's a great wine.
I think so.
Yeah,
it's giving like bright raspberry for me right now. And there's something that I get out of the nose in Pagani that is pretty unique for me, which is like orange zest. And it's pretty consistent year over year.
Yeah.
Yeah, it almost has like that sort of tropical-ish kind of nose to it for me always, and then that acidity on the palate is just it's racy. It carries the fruit.
That is fun. It is fun to taste these.
It definitely is. It's always one of the funnest things we do all year is the virtual, where we get to taste them all back to back and talk about them. And we did have one question come in, Gabe, about actually the differences between Pagani and Paso over in Russian River. So just asking about soils, typical harvest dates, because that's another kind of cooler climate Zinfandel vineyard in Sonoma.
Sure. So they're both alluvial soils, but then so are Geyserville and Lytton Springs, right? So Paso is just south of Healdsburg. It is in the Russian River, but it's on the warmer side, and it's on sandy, very sandy soil. So it has, and that imparts a more elegance to the tannins in Paso. Still good acidity, but more elegance. And there might be a vine or two of Alicante at Paso, but the main variety there besides Zinfandel is Petite Sirah. And so that changes the profile of the wine a little bit too. And we typically pick Paso a little bit before Pagani. So it's kind of the East Bench, Lytton, and then Paso, and then some of our other Russian River vineyards that are kind of more into the Russian River to the west of Sebastopol, and then or Santa Rosa, sorry, and then Pagani. So yeah, for whatever reason, Pagani sits in this little bowl that really carries it late into the year.
Yeah, I'd also add, like Dave said, I think one of the biggest differences of Pagani, you really do have much more of a classic field blend, and you've got those Teinturier grapes, which I think tends to make the wine a little darker, whereas Paso, you've got much more red fruit, and it's almost has like a Pinot quality to it. So there's similarities, but in the glass, I think they're quite different.
Or a Gamay quality, right, John? Anyway,
that was a little sneak peek.
Yeah, sorry.
I have some Russian River Gamay in the tank right now.
Yeah, we'll mute the mics when they talk about that. We do have one question that's just come into the chat that somebody is asking us if we can expand a little bit on how we've mentioned a couple times now that the grapes taste so great, but they aren't quite ready. They're not quite ripened up. So the flavor profile's there, but the phenolic ripeness is not there, right? Is that essentially what's happening?
Well, I think one of the, I think what we're probably referring to primarily is, when we talk about grapes being ripe, there's ripeness in terms of just the level of sugar that's in the grape, but then there's also, physiological ripeness where, like you said, Mike, in terms of the tannins being ripe, and also looking for that kind of I think that perfect balance in terms of acidity. And the ripeness. So a lot of times we're getting the flavors, but I think if we picked it at such low sugar, we might end up with a wine that might be just a little thinner than what we would want. So we just wait a little bit longer. But we're certainly much happier when we get the flavor at lower sugar than the opposite way, where sugars just start outrunning ripeness, and then we have to hurry to pick just because we don't want to make a wine that's over 15% alcohol.
Right. Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. And then we had one other question on Pagani come in as well, about the plantings in the vineyard. Are the grapes, is it a field blend, or do we have single blocks here?
So
yes.
It's a field blend, but and the oldest vines planted in the 1880s, 1890s are pretty mixed. The other blocks planted in the 1920s are like 96% Zin, 95% Zin, so a little more pure, but still have other varieties in them. And then the newest plantings are anywhere between 10 and 16 or 17% Petite Sirah planted in amongst the Zin.
Got it. Okay. Perfect. And we'll transition to our next wine now, and we'll go from kind of a little bit of a field blend, not a field blend, to pretty much a full-on field blend here with our 2023 Lytton Springs. And John, can you kind of start us off on this one?
Yeah, for sure. So, Lytton Springs, of course, along with Geyserville, are really our longest running Zinfandel-based wines at Ridge. Geyserville, we first made our first Geyserville in 1966, and at Lytton Springs in 1972. So, we've certainly had an opportunity to really get to know these vineyards over the years. In general, we find that the Lytton compared to the Geyserville, even though they're only a couple of miles apart from each other, you tend to get darker fruit in the Lytton Springs, maybe a little bit more structure to the wine. And there's this certain earthiness to the fruit, which I really find in the 23, that's quite typical of Lytton. Also in the field blend, Petite Sirah tends to make up a fairly large proportion. Although maybe not quite as much in 2023. Petite Sirah it really does great in the soils at Lytton. But yeah, and certainly like Shauna was mentioning, 2023 was definitely, it was an exercise in patience. We were harvesting Zinfandel well into October, which is pretty rare, especially these days. And even more so, we have a couple of wines from 2022 coming up, and you couldn't have more different vintages. 2022 being fairly warm, a drought year, lower yields, heat wave coming right up to harvest, and then in 2023 you really had none of that. So you had this really long, growing season and ripening period, which allowed us to really pinpoint our picking dates. And Sean and the team, I think, did an amazing job with the 2023. There's this almost suppleness to it, and yet behind all that is that structure that's going to make this wine, I think, easily be a 20 to 25 year selling wine.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it's still quite approachable right now. But I'll kind of be honest. Like last year, we released the 22. It was the 50th bottling. We did a whole campaign around it. There was this big buzz around it. It was incredibly successful for us. And coming into this year, I'm like, oh geez, how do we follow that up with the 23? I'm a little nervous, and in the glass, like it's just amazing. I mean, it absolutely follows up, and people are going to love it. They're going to taste it and absolutely love it.
Well, and I think 22 and 23 really illustrate kind of the way that Ridge makes wine, right? It's vineyard specific. We're looking for extraordinary sites, and it changes by the vintage. I mean, 22 Lytton Springs versus 23 Lytton Springs, they are very different wines, made the same way with, many of the same parcels. But yeah, what the vintage gave us was a little different. And something interesting, as you folks have probably noticed, we include ingredients on the back of our bottle, and almost nothing from 2023 has water or tartaric acid as far as like Zinfandels go, which, in 22, we made, moderate adds to certain things, like a little bit of water, a little bit of acid if we needed to bring it back down into the zone. But in 2023, nothing got too ripe. And that's really, it's kind of an atypical vintage. In fact, actually, if I'm comparing it to this year, we haven't added water or citric or tartaric to anything this year either.
Interesting.
It is interesting when you think about that.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. And this, we just flipped over to our field blend map, and this is one of my favorite things, particularly when I'm out in the field tasting people on wines and showing them, this and Geyserville as well, where we have a similar map. It's, we talk about field blends all the time, but this really puts it in perspective, and you can see down to the vine, the breakdown. And Dave, it's interesting, when you look at particularly the old patch right in front of the winery there, there's kind of a pattern that you see if you really follow it. It's not just a random planting.
Yeah, it's gotten a little bit diluted over the years from replanting, but if you look, every third row and every fourth vine is a Teinturier variety. So Shauna was mentioning them, but the majority at Lytton Springs here are Alicante Boucher and Grand Noir. There might be one or two Petite Boucher in there as well, but it's pretty cool, and it was obviously planted that way on purpose so that it didn't matter how the vineyard was picked, there'd be a little bit of that, the Teinturier in there. And one of the neat things that the retail team does at Lytton Springs is they have a little electric, I don't know what they call it, vineyard cart or something, and they do these tours. And so you can drive along the road, and Mauro Maldonado, my viticulturist up at Sonoma, has worked with Elliot at Lytton Springs, and they're making some signs of the different varieties. So as people drive by, they'll be able to see exactly what a Grand Noir vine looks like, or a Pelerson vine, right? It's pretty cool, pretty neat to see.
Yeah, it definitely is. Okay, perfect. Well, we'll stay at Lytton and we'll transition to our next wine, and we'll move over to our Lytton Estate Petite Sirah. And Shauna, if I could start with you. And we initially right out of the gates have a question because people notice, we go from 23 Lytton Springs to 22 Lytton Estate Petite Sirah here. Is there a reason it's released a year later? And there's definitely good reason for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's nothing petite about Petite Sirah, right? Except the size of the berries. So Petite Sirah is a big burly wine, and it needs a little bit of time. It needs some time to, kind of settle down in the bottle and to come together, and for all of the oak and all of the beautiful fruit qualities to marry. And so this really is exciting for me because I am down there tasting unfinished wine all day. And so to taste these finished wines in the glass is really exciting. But I haven't revisited the 22 Petite Sirah in a few months, and it really is like hitting its stride right here. Getting all these really beautiful, like blackberry, black tea, pipe tobacco, saddle leather. Petite Sirah is very happy at Lytton West. And Dave, maybe you can talk about the soils there and why Petite is so happy there. But it just seems to thrive.
Yeah. First though, Sean, I have to say there's nothing petite about Petite Sirah. That could have come out of your dad's mouth. That was awesome. Petite Sirah does well in clay. And that's the biggest difference between the soils that are right out in front of the winery and the majority of the soils over at our Lytton West property is that the 4 other soil types we have at Lytton West, 3 of those have a higher percentage of clay, and Petite Sirah loves that. Zinfandel, not so much. And so it just thrives there. And the climate-wise, both love it there. But yeah, the pests there, it's a little bit different from, people might remember some of our York Creek bottlings. The Petite Sirah that we grow at Lytton Springs, or Lytton Estate, it still has the tannin, but they're a little bit rounder when they're young. So you can actually, you can actually drink to 22. You don't have to lay it down for 10 more years.
Well,
Yeah,
and sorry, go ahead, Mike.
No, go ahead, Shauna.
Oh, I was gonna say, to your point, Dave, when we're making Petite Sirah, we're really focusing on tannin management. So we're not trying to push the grapes to the absolute max. Usually we're actually going to press off before the Petite Sirah is dry, usually around 2 or 3 bricks, because we're tasting the tanks. And as soon as we get ample tannin and structure off the Petite Sirah, we press it because we have exactly what we need. And we're not trying to over amplify this thing that needs to be laid down for 20 years. We already have a wine that can lay down for 20 years. So it kind of makes the Petite more eminently drinkable, just a little less tannic in its youth.
And, what you just said kind of was almost essentially what I was going to say or ask, really. It's, the first comment we get when we pour this for people out in the trade is, they kind of like get ready for it because they're, going to get punched in the face, and they taste it and they're like, oh, that's actually approachable and balanced. And they're just not used to it. So many of the Petite Sirahs out there in the market are that big, rough, strip the enamel. It's almost painful. But this, like you said, you're intentionally managing the tannin and pump overs and not trying to extract too much.
Yeah, no, we're not trying to win the most tannic Petite Sirah race. Balanced Petite Sirah, we're striving for that.
Yeah, fantastic. And Dave, we have a question coming in that I'm going to ask you. So we're asking, somebody's asking if we can differentiate between Petite Sirah and Durif, like what the difference is there and how they're connected.
Yeah, so you want the short answer or the long? No, they're the same. So there's a plant breeder in the 1880s in south of France that named Durif, and like a lot of people back then, they were experimenting with doing crosses, and he actually and like most of the people that were doing that, then he named the vine after himself. So it was called Durif, and it's a cross between Syrah and this other grape called Pelersan, which is an obscure southern French grape. And it never caught on in the old world, but it did catch on in California. In fact, up until 1972, Napa Valley, the most widely planted grape in Napa Valley was Petite Sirah. When it came over to California in the 1880s, late 1880s, it was known as, they started calling it Petite Sirah. Sometimes it was mixed plantings with the two parents, right, Syrah and Pelersan. But everybody knew that this, and it caught its name by Petite Sirah in California somehow, probably because it's not a very big growing plant. It has big clusters, but the shoots are fairly, pendant. They droop down. They don't grow very vigorous, and that it's caught on, like I say, and a little bit in Australia. They got the budwood from California. They call it Durif still, but the Petite Sirah name stuck in California. They're the same variety. So that was the long answer to a short question.
No, but that's a great answer. And I don't think I don't really recall ever seeing anybody label put Durif on an actual label.
Yeah, there might be one or two in California, but because you'll see that in Australia, there'll be a couple Australian lines, but I don't know that they're ever exported, Mike. I mean, you might not only find them there.
Perfect. Great. Well, this is, it's interesting. Petite Sirah is a small production for us. It's really limited, but it's always kind of one of the favorites out there. People really like it. They ask us when's the next vintage coming out. They're waiting for it. So it's always fun to taste this and kind of talk about it. We don't get to bring it out in the market too much anymore because of its following. So great. So we'll transition now to our next red and a new wine for us. So we'll go to our 2023 Santa Cruz Mountains Cabernet Sauvignon. And John, hopefully you can kind of take us through this. Being a new wine, I'd love for us to talk a little bit about the approach to why we're making this, and of course the regional character versus single vineyard character.
Yeah, no, it's the Santa Cruz Mountains, that label for Ridge actually goes back quite a ways. Back in the late 70s, in 1978, we first made a wine called the Santa Cruz Mountains Cabernet. And at that time, all of the grapes that went into it were all from Monte Bello. And one of the sort of confusions that created was that a lot of people, since we were naming the wine after a region, figured that we were buying grapes from all over the place and not, that it wasn't an estate wine. So we changed that in 2008, we changed it to the estate Cabernet. And, probably one of the most high demand wines that we make is our estate Cabernet, which all comes from Monte Bello. And I know Mike and his team are always getting questions about, send me more estate Cabernet, but we can't, you can't back order, you can't just make more. So we sort of been thinking about, well, what could we do to offer something that we think is representative of the Santa Cruz Mountains, and so we came up with this bottling and sort of revived the Santa Cruz Mountains designation. And so what we have here is a wine which is made up from a number of vineyards that are not Ridge Estate vineyards, but are actually growers within the Santa Cruz Mountains appellation, along with some of our fruit as well. I mean, I think we're going to talk a little bit about a lot of the development we've been doing up at Monte Bello. So we have some young vines that go into this wine as well. And I think the overall aim was to make a wine that is maybe a little bit more approachable than, say, Monte Bello or even the Estate. And also, something at a little better price point, and just more drinkable kind of now Cabernet. But we still make it in the same way that we make all of our wines. So this is natural yeast fermentation, doing sort of going after as much extraction as we think is appropriate. Although for me, this is a somewhat softer wine than either the Monte Bello or the Estate.
Yeah, it's certainly more approachable. And I actually cheated and I opened this last night and had a glass of it with dinner last night. And it's, it just got released, so we're just getting it out in the market, but I've had a chance to pour it for a few people already. And people just love it. The price point, the approachability, it still has that mountain fruit character to it. And I love, what it gives us is that flexibility, like you said, with some younger blocks going forward, partner ranches, to really promote the Santa Cruz Mountains, which, we've kind of done forever, but put it on the label again and really be out there with it. And it helps tell that story of Santa Cruz Mountains, then Estate, then Monte Bello.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, you can kind of tell right there from the map that's on the screen that Santa Cruz Mountains is actually one of the largest AVAs in California. But because it is actually, it's actually defined, it has to be at a certain elevation, it really is mountains. And so it's not like Napa Valley where you can just sort of grow grapes anywhere and you have the valley floor. So, in Santa Cruz Mountains, vineyards tend to be much more balkanized, and it's not easy really to get a view of what the Santa Cruz Mountains, what the sort of nature of it is, because you just don't see that many wines out there from the Santa Cruz Mountains.
No, you really don't. And we're obviously in the midst of 2025 vintage right now. How do you see fruit for this coming together? Are we sticking with the same ranches here? Do you see any changes potentially, or is it still a bit?
Yeah, well, we have actually picked up another ranch nearby that is owned by Thomas Fogarty, one of our neighbors. So we will be adding one more, and we hope to add a few more as things become, as opportunities come up.
Perfect, which is exciting. The flexibility that we'll have with this wine. And we had a question come in: why Bates Ranch? And Dave, maybe you can talk a little bit about Bates Ranch and why we're including some of that fruit here.
Yeah, Bates Ranch has been around a long time. I remember in the 70s they had some Cabernet that they were selling, and they've always sold fruit. They have a label now. They've had the label now probably for 10 or 15 years, but they have a little extra fruit. And Prudy Fox, who's a vineyard manager, mostly on the Santa Cruz side of the Santa Cruz Mountains, but she's got her fingers all over the place, and she's excellent vineyard manager and viticulturist. And she started working with the Bates Ranch 4 or 5 years ago, and approached us saying that they had a little bit of fruit available, and we jumped at the chance because it's in a really neat spot. It's a little valley on the I guess it'd be in the inland side of Mount Madonna, so one of the higher mountains in the southern part of the appellation, and it's just a really cool little vineyard. And they actually still have horned Herefords. That's what I grew up with in our farm in Minnesota, and it's fun to see those cows running around. Not in the vineyard, of course, but around outside the vineyard. And And yeah, it's a neat spot, and we really like working with them.
Great. Yeah. And John, kind of shifting back to you for a quick second, you mentioned how it's sort of handled the same way as, estate Cabernet. What about oak? How are you approaching, the oak program with this
Yeah,
one?
so all American oak, but with the Santa Cruz Mountains, we're certainly dialing back the amount of new oak. Monte Bello being the only one at Ridge where we use 100% new oak, and then our estate is about 50%. So this is a little bit closer to maybe 25%.
Which just really helps with that approachability early on, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I think and it lets the fruit sort of come out at an earlier stage than might otherwise be the case.
Excellent. Yeah, the sales team in particular is super excited about this wine. Everybody we've tasted, I saw Maggie in the comments had it out in St. Louis this week and did really well with it. So we're excited. It's another option for our customers and another way to sell some cab. Because you mentioned it earlier. I mean, I probably spend more time every year telling people no to estate cab than I do to a lot of other things. So it's great to have another option here. And we'll stay in the Santa Cruz Mountains, and we'll move to our final wine of the day today, to our 2022 Monte Bello. And John, maybe we stay with you and kind of talk a little bit about this wine.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, as we were mentioning earlier, 2022 and 2023, very different vintages. 2022, we didn't have all that nice rain that we got in 23. So, we were starting in much drier conditions. The vine responded with much lower yields, really small berries. And then of course we had quite a bit of heat, in the last stages where the grapes were getting ripened. So, it posed a challenge in terms of just picking and getting grapes in, at the right ripeness and the right sugar level that we were looking for. And I think because of the drought and because of those smaller berries, we noticed immediately that this is a wine where the tannins were very easy to extract. I mean, because there's so much skin to juice, in the fermenter. So when it came to aging the wine, usually we age Monte Bello for about 18 months, all in new oak, as I mentioned. For 2022, we started coming up to when we were going to bottle it, and I really felt that just quite wasn't ready, and it needed a little bit more time. So we held it in barrel through harvest and didn't bottle this until November. So really some extended aging, but I think it really helped the wine to just kind of soften a bit before we put it in bottle.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously the reviews have been fantastic. I mean, it's to me, this is a classic Monte Bello. It's going to age forever. It's got all the structure, everything you want from it, kind of coming out of the glass here.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's great to have that, to have the conditions, at Monte Bello, where we have even though it was a warm vintage, we're still close enough to the ocean that we're getting that moderation of the weather. So we're getting ripeness, but we're doing it, while staying in the 13% alcohol range. And so you've got the richness of the wine, you've got the structure of the wine, but you don't have the heaviness. It just kind of remains light on its feet.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have one question that came in here, John, that we kind of bounce back and forth a little bit between wines, but it was about the Santa Cruz Mountains cab, and they were asking if we're still going to do the estate cab. And we can talk a little bit about that. The short answer is yes. There's going to be 3 cabs in the Ridge portfolio. There's going to be Monte Bello, Estate, and then the appellation line of Santa Cruz Mountains. Yeah,
that's a good clarification, because we got a little confusion there with all the different names.
Yeah, exactly. And the Santa Cruz Mountains cab is going to be packed in 12 packs. The estate cab will be packed in 6, and Monte Bello will remain in 3s. So that'll be a way to kind of differentiate it as well out there. And we had one more question come into John on the 22. you had mentioned that it was not quite ready, and you bottled it later than usual. And the question is, what attributes did you feel were not ready to bottle on the normal schedule?
So I thought probably the main thing was just that the tannins were still kind of right up front and really hadn't incorporated with the rest of the wine the way that they usually have. I mean, Monte Bello is always going to be a wine with impressive tannin, and impressive structure, but it just seemed a little harder. So allowing it just to stay in barrel, have that little bit of contact with air that you get through the barrel staves. I think it just helped to get it in the right place for when we wanted to put it in bottle.
Perfect. Yeah, I think that answers it well. It was a great question, just to understand that a little more. And we're on this drone shot right now, Dave, and we've been talking to the group listening here, and we have a lot of new people joining us today for the first time about our open space and about what's happening with the open space. On kind of a quick recap, can you let people know about the open space, what it is, what we're doing, and where we're at?
Yeah, so the open space is land that we have an agricultural easement on in perpetuity. It's owned by the people of Santa Clara County. It was bought up in the 70s as a buffer for development, and we gave up development rights in the vineyards surrounding our winery, production winery at Peroni, for those agricultural rights. So it's in perpetuity, and that agriculture is an allowed use in the open space charter. And we've narrowed that down so that the only allowed use in this agricultural easement is organic wine grapes, which is pretty much that's what we want to do, organically grown wine grapes. And we're into phase 3. We planted phase 3 this past year, a couple months ago, and that's about 5.5 acres of rootstock. We still it's going to be predominantly Cabernet, but we will be budding that next year. We just picked the phase 2, and that was about 8 tons, split between Cabernet Sauvignon and Cabernet Franc. And we have a little bit of Petite Verdot to pick probably Tuesday. And that's 7.21 acres that will begin yielding in earnest next year. And phase 1 was actually a land swap that we have renamed that Upper Gate, and that's adjacent to the Peroni. That's part of the Peroni Ranch, and we expect 30 or so tons from that this year. And last year, the 22 tons went into Monte Bello, so that's what we're hoping for this year as well. So yeah, that's kind of in a nutshell. We still have 3 more phases to go. The next phase 4 is going to be right next to our oldest Merlot planting, our historic vines of Merlot planted in 1968, called The Point, and that's going to be an extension of that. We don't know what we're going to plant there yet, but we'll start that development probably in 2026 with land clearing and getting it ready. So yeah, that's the open space, and it is situated in between Peroni and Torre, so in between our production winery and the tasting room.
Yeah, we just flipped to that map, and you can kind of see the gap there right between Peroni and Torre, and that's the whole space that we're talking about. And it's exciting to see that grapes, when we first did this, but to see it actually come in and make Monte Bello and be a part of the blend and be a part of the wine now, it's exciting, and more to come, which is also exciting as well.
Yeah, we're happy on that. And the other reason why we were able to do that is that it had vineyards on it before Prohibition. So that was another part of the open space charter. So yeah, it's an exciting project, and we couldn't be happier to have use of that land and to really take care of it and put it back into wine grapes.
Yeah, I mean, it's really amazing. It's going back, 150 years of what that mountain actually looked like from a planting perspective and bringing it back to that. It's so rare that you can have the opportunity to do something like that.
Yeah, and I would also say that it's rare to have the soils and climate and everything match up so well. And, when the partners started Ridge Vineyards back in 1962, they knew they had some good wine, but they didn't really know exactly what they had. I think Paul knew after he tasted a couple of those wines as he was deciding whether or not to join. I think he kind of knew that there was something special here at Monte Bello. But it's 60 years later, it's still proving that it is a great place to grow grapes.
Yeah, absolutely. And we dropped a link to an article about open space, which gives a little more context around what we just talked about into the chat. It's also in our fall newsletter that's out there now. And you mentioned Monte Bello and all the history behind it. We're also, next year, just a little bit of a teaser, but we're also coming up on the 50th anniversary of the Judgment of Paris tasting in May. So we'll talk quite a bit about that next year with everybody and celebrate that together. But it's obviously a landmark tasting that really changed the wine world forever. Perfect. And I know we're coming up on the top of the hour, and I want to be respectful of everybody's time. Everybody's in sales meetings today, running around busy, and we want to thank everybody for taking the time to join us. It's twice a year that we do this, and really means so much to us that you take the time to spend with us, taste through. Thanks for all the comments and chats and Q&A today. It was really engaging across the board. Great questions. Special thanks to our panel for taking time out of harvest to spend an hour with us. They're probably ready to kill me now and get back to work. But thank you guys. I really appreciate it. I know everybody out there really appreciates it. And on behalf of everybody here at Ridge Vineyards, thank you all for the continued support, partnership, and belief in what we do. Here's to a successful fall season, selling season. Hope it's busy for everybody, and we'll see you in the spring. Cheers.